I came home later than usual that Tuesday evening, weary after a long day of meetings at the bank. The early spring air was still warm in Austin, but there was a sharp breeze that seemed to push me into my apartment quicker than normal. I dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl on the entry table, set down my bag, and noticed something out of place on my desk. An envelope lay squarely in the center, positioned too neatly to have been left there by accident. I stood for a moment, shoes still on, staring at it. The handwriting across the front wasn't mine. Elegant cursive letters sprawled out like something you'd see on a wedding invitation. My stomach tightened. I tore it open and slid out a glossy card. Heavy cardstock, shimmering gold lettering, embossed patterns around the edges. You are invited to celebrate Marquette Vale's 30th birthday, 250 guests, hosted at the Greenfield Event Hall. I read it once, then again, thinking maybe fatigue was making me misread. But no, the words stayed the same, mocking me. A small RSVP card slipped onto the desk, my personal email printed at the bottom in bold letters. My own name plastered everywhere, as though I had authored the whole thing. I hadn't agreed to any party, let alone an event for 250 people at one of the most expensive venues in town. I sat down slowly, the invitation still in my hands. My mind raced. Was this a prank? Had some marketing company made a mistake? The pit in my stomach told me otherwise. My parents had a history of borrowing my life to suit their plans. They'd taken over my beach house years ago for family gatherings without asking, turned my career promotions into community bragging rights, and made every milestone about themselves. The invitation in my hand was too polished, too detailed, too expensive to be anything but their doing. Who gave them the right to do this? I muttered aloud, though the empty apartment had no answer. I flipped the card back and forth, the glossy surface catching the overhead light. The scent of the ink was fresh, meaning these had been printed recently. That meant they weren't just planned, they were already out. I placed the card on the table and rubbed my temples. My irritation grew heavier by the minute. If 250 invitations had already been mailed, then hundreds of people now believed I had chosen to host some lavish spectacle. The very thought made me nauseous. I wanted my 30th to be quiet, maybe dinner with a handful of friends, not this circus. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept waking, the golden lettering flashing in my mind, mocking me in the dark. By morning, I'd convinced myself that maybe the fallout wouldn't be so bad. Maybe only a few had gone out. Maybe no one would mention it. That illusion shattered the moment I stepped into the office. "Morning, birthday girl!" My colleague Daniel leaned against the divider of my cubicle, grinning. "So, big bash this weekend, huh? Didn't know you had it in you." I froze, my bag still slung over my shoulder. "What?" He waved a cream-colored envelope. "The same invitation." My invitation. "This thing is fancier than most weddings. Are we supposed to bring tuxedos?" Heat rushed to my face. "Daniel, I didn't send that." "Sure," he laughed, tapping the card. 250 guests. You must have hit the jackpot or something." Before I could respond, another coworker, Lisa, walked by holding the same envelope. She smirked. "I had no idea you were such a socialite, Marquette. Always pegged you as low-key. Guess I was wrong." I tried to protest, my words tumbling out too quickly. "I didn't plan this. Honestly, I didn't even know about it until last night. There's been some mistake." The look Lisa gave me was the kind of look people give when they think you're being coy. "Oh, come on. Don't play modest. If you wanted to throw a gala, just say so. We're all adults." Her tone stung worse than the words. I turned back to my computer, cheeks burning. In the reflection of the screen, I saw them exchange knowing glances before walking away. By lunch, the invitations were all anyone seemed to talk about. Even my boss approached me in the break room, smiling politely, but with an edge of curiosity. "So, I hear you're hosting quite the gathering. 250 people, that's impressive. Building networks, right?" I forced a steady voice. "Actually, it wasn't me. I didn't approve any of this." His smile tightened. He gave me a look that said he didn't believe me, then changed the subject. But the damage was done. My reputation was no longer in my control. As I sat with my untouched salad, I remembered something Maya Angelou once said. "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. My parents had shown me again and again that my boundaries meant nothing, and now their disregard had spilled into my professional life. By the time I returned home that evening, humiliation mixed with a simmering anger. I tossed my bag down and collapsed on the couch, staring at the invitation still lying on my desk. My phone buzzed. A text from an old college acquaintance lit the screen. "Can't wait for your party. It's going to be amazing." Then another. "Thanks for inviting me. It's been years." And another. "Heard about the 250 guest bash. Count me in." Dozens of messages streamed in. Names I hadn't seen in years. My hand trembled as I scrolled, the phone vibrating nonstop. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't a few stray invitations. The entire city seemed to know. I set the phone down and stood by the kitchen counter, the invitation gleaming under the lamp like a piece of damning evidence. My chest tightened with the weight of it all. This wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. I thought of every time my parents had disregarded my voice. The summer they borrowed my house without asking, the times they introduced my accomplishments as if they were theirs, the countless little ways they diminished my ownership of my own life. "I should have seen this coming," I whispered to the quiet room. Small boundaries ignored always grow into bigger ones. I stared at the phone, its screen lighting up again and again. With every buzz, my irritation hardened into something sharper. Finally, I picked it up, opened my contacts, and pressed Mom. My hand shook, not from fear, but from something far stronger, a storm rising inside me that could no longer be contained. The line clicked, and her cheerful voice answered as if she had been waiting. Her voice came through the line sweet and bright, as if she had been waiting. "Hi, sweetheart. What a surprise. Are you calling about Saturday?" I gripped the phone tighter. "Saturday? You mean the party I never agreed to host?" A pause, then laughter. Light, dismissive, cutting. "Oh, honey, don't act so shocked. You never plan these things. Your father and I thought it was time someone stepped in. 30 is a milestone. This is for you." "For me?" My words came out sharper than I intended. "How is it for me when I didn't even know about it until I found an invitation on my desk?" Another click, and my father's deeper voice joined, the tone practiced and firm. "It's just a party, Marquette. Don't be so difficult. Everyone expects something like this. It reflects well on the family." I felt heat rise in my chest. Reflects well on the family. Exactly. This isn't about me. It's about you. You used my name, my email, and sent out 250 invitations without asking. Mother sighed, the kind of sigh that made me feel 10 years old again. "We're just trying to celebrate you. Why do you always have to make things so complicated? The community wants to see how far you've come." My jaw clenched. The community? Or you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're using my life as a stage. "Marquette," my father cut in, voice stern. "No one is trying to hurt you. You work too much. You don't do anything social. This is good for you. And it's done. Invitations are out. People are excited. Don't ruin it now." I could almost hear my pulse pounding in my ears. I remembered Eleanor Roosevelt's words, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Yet here I was, being dragged down by my own parents, expected to smile and play along. "I'll talk to you later," I said, forcing my voice calm. But this conversation isn't over. I ended the call before they could reply, staring at the phone as though it had just burned me. The next morning, the cafeteria at work buzzed like a hive. I balanced my tray, trying to find a corner, but before I sat down, a group of colleagues spotted me. "Marquette," one of them called. "So do we need tuxedos for this thing, or just cocktail dresses?" He waved the same ivory invitation I had seen last night. Another chimed in, smirking. "I hear it's fancier than most weddings. Are we getting free drinks at least?" Laughter bubbled around the table. I forced a polite smile. "Look, I didn't plan this. My parents—" "Oh, right," a woman interrupted, rolling her eyes. "Of course, the classic, 'it wasn't me.'" Their smirk stung more than their words. To them, my denial was a performance. They believed I was playing coy, pretending modesty when in fact, I was orchestrating some showy spectacle. I sat down, poking at my food but unable to eat. Every whispered conversation, every sideways glance felt like a dagger. Reputation at work is currency, and mine was slipping through my fingers. I'd always been careful, on time, professional, competent. Now I looked like someone flaunting wealth, throwing a party that screamed vanity. One colleague leaned across the table. "Marquette, you could have just said you like to celebrate big. No need to act embarrassed." I met his gaze and said firmly, "I didn't plan this. My parents made decisions without me. That's the truth." Silence lingered for a beat before they shrugged and went back to their chatter. But the damage was done. They didn't believe me. As I cleared my tray, one thought echoed. In this country, nothing feels worse than being painted a liar in your own story. That evening, I came home exhausted, head heavy with every word from my parents and the cafeteria. I set down my bag, poured a glass of water, and sat at the table where the invitation still lay. I stared at it, the gold lettering gleaming in the lamplight. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't generosity gone wrong. This was deliberate. My parents had orchestrated the whole thing for themselves. When control becomes tradition, I whispered, rebellion feels like betrayal. But maybe betrayal is the only way to reclaim myself. I opened a fresh notebook and began jotting notes, venue costs, names I'd heard mentioned, expectations others now had of me. It wasn't a plan yet, but it was the first step. My phone buzzed again with RSVPs, friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I turned it face down, refusing to look. This wasn't my party. But as I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, I felt something hardening inside me. Maybe this wasn't my celebration. Maybe it was my war. When I got home that evening, I dropped my bag near the door and leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on me. My coworkers' smirks still stung, their laughter echoing in my head like an unpleasant soundtrack. I had tried to explain, but no one believed me, and deep down, I knew this wasn't some accident. I had seen my parents' fingerprints on too many of my milestones not to recognize the same pattern here. I slumped onto the couch and unlocked my phone, thinking I might distract myself with emails or the news. Instead, I noticed a notification from a cousin I rarely spoke to. It was a screenshot, dropped into a group text, and my stomach tightened as I tapped it open. It wasn't just any group chat. It was the family group chat, the one I hadn't even known existed. I scrolled through messages that hit harder than any insult a stranger could throw at me. "She's too shy to object," one relative typed. Another chimed in. "Better not ask her, she'll overthink. This is for her own good." My aunt had added, "She's lucky we're making this happen. Otherwise, she'd just let her birthday pass like any other dull day." Every line punched me in the gut. My whole family had been conspiring about this party, carefully planning, reassuring each other that I wouldn't say a word. They weren't even debating whether it was right. They were counting on my silence. I set the phone on the coffee table and covered my face with my hands. Humiliation and grief washed over me in equal measure. I wasn't seen as a 30-year-old woman with a career, responsibilities, and independence. I was still the youngest, the one they could manipulate, the one who never raised her voice. In American families, we talk a lot about trust and respect, but being excluded from decisions about your own life, there's no quicker way to fracture both. Trust, once broken, rarely shatters in one loud crack. It crumbles quietly, piece by piece, until all you have left is dust. And staring at those messages, I felt like every bit of trust I'd ever given them was now gone. Before I could even process that, another notification buzzed in. Facebook. My mother's profile picture flashed across the screen. Against my better judgment, I tapped it open. There it was, posted an hour ago. A brightly colored digital poster of the event, complete with my name in bold script. "So proud of our daughter, hosting 250 guests for her 30th birthday, a true celebration of family and community." The comments poured in. "What a generous daughter. Such a blessing to have her host. We'll be there with bells on." Dozens of likes, dozens of affirmations, all of them painting me as the mastermind behind this spectacle. I sank deeper into the couch, phone still in my hand. This wasn't just a family affair anymore. My public reputation was now tied to a lie. I had been erased and replaced with their version of me, a daughter who lived for grand gestures, who enjoyed showing off, who happily carried the family banner on her shoulders. I whispered into the empty room, I've been erased and replaced by their version of me. Scrolling through the likes and comments, I felt trapped inside an image I hadn't built. In today's America, Facebook isn't just a place to share photos. It's a stage where reputations are created or destroyed, and once that false picture takes root, correcting it feels impossible. I set my phone down on the table again, but my eyes kept drifting back to it. The invitation glared at me from the desk, the Facebook post, the group chat, all of it swirled together into one heavy truth. Sitting at my kitchen table, I opened my laptop and pulled the screenshot folder back up. Each word from the group chat replayed in my head. Too shy to object. Better not ask her. Generous daughter. Each comment under my mother's post reinforced the same erasure. She's not really herself. She's what we made her. The wound wasn't just about this party. It was about years of being underestimated, dismissed, ignored. About being treated as though my independence was temporary, a child's game they could undo at any moment. I thought about something I'd once heard Oprah say. You get in life what you have the courage to ask for. I had rarely asked. I had let them decide too many things, let them frame my choices as theirs. Maybe it was time to stop. I reached for my phone and drafted a message to my parents. This has gone too far. You don't get to decide my life for me. My thumb hovered over send, but I stopped. The words felt right, but the timing didn't. They weren't ready to hear it, and I needed more than a text to reclaim what they had stolen. Instead, I opened a new folder on my laptop and labeled it simply, Evidence. I copied the screenshots, the Facebook post, the RSVP texts. All of it went in. If they wanted to paint a picture of me that wasn't true, then I would build my own record of the truth. As I clicked save, another notification buzzed across my screen. This time, it wasn't a friend or a relative. It was from the venue itself. The following morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, trying to clear my inbox. The night before had ended with me saving evidence of the group chat and my mother's Facebook post, but I still woke with a restless heaviness. I scrolled through the usual flood of work messages until one subject line stopped me cold. Invoice for Greenfield Event Hall, balance due. I hesitated before clicking, a low dread tightening my stomach. The email opened to reveal an official letterhead from the venue. It stated plainly, balance due within 10 days. Legal action may follow for non-payment. Attached at the bottom was the bill. Thousands of dollars. My name typed neatly at the top as the client. I pushed back from the table, breath catching. This wasn't just about my reputation anymore. They hadn't only hijacked my image, they had tied my legal and financial responsibility to their performance. I stood and began pacing the small space between my kitchen and living room. My mind raced with questions. Do I call the venue? Do I call a lawyer? Do I call my parents and demand answers right now? One thought pierced through the fog. In American law, liability follows the name on the contract. My name. It didn't matter if I hadn't signed it. It was there in black and white. If the venue pursued this, I'd be the one on the hook. It's one thing to steal my face, I whispered to the empty room. It's another to forge my signature. The kettle clicked as I started water for tea, but I never poured it. Instead, I grabbed my phone, found my parents' number, and pressed call. My mother answered almost immediately, cheerful as always. Darling, how's my birthday girl? Did you see the flyer online? Isn't it beautiful? My voice came out steadier than I felt. I got an invoice today, thousands of dollars, with my name on it. What were you thinking? Silence for half a second, then her voice turned soft, guilt-laden. Sweetheart, don't worry about that. It's all part of the plan. Think of what this means for the community. People are thrilled. It would break their hearts if you pulled out now. I cut in before she could add more sugar to her tone. My name is not your property. You forged me into this. This stops now." Her sigh was theatrical. "You're overreacting. We're doing this for you. Everyone wants to celebrate. Can't you just let yourself be loved for once?" Before I could answer, my father's voice appeared in the background. "Marquette, don't exaggerate. It's just money, and you can afford it. You've been working at that bank long enough. What's the harm in spending some of it on family?" My grip on the phone tightened. "The harm is that you didn't ask me. The harm is that you've trapped me into paying for something I never wanted, and if this doesn't end, I'll cancel everything myself." That drew laughter. Low, dismissive, as if I'd told a joke. My father's chuckle cut through me more than shouting ever could. "You won't do that. You've always been too polite. Besides, everyone expects it. Don't embarrass us." I pressed my lips together, forcing calm. Warnings meant nothing to people who believed you wouldn't bite. They had spent decades grooming me into the shy youngest. To them, I was still the girl who wouldn't raise her voice. "I'm serious," I said firmly. "If you keep this up, you'll regret it." Then I hung up before they could respond. The call left me trembling with a mixture of rage and clarity. They weren't going to listen. They thought this was still their stage and I was still their puppet. But I wasn't. I needed proof, allies, and a plan. That weekend, I went to the grocery store to try to quiet my thoughts with something ordinary: bananas, bread, milk. As I moved through the produce aisle, a stranger's voice pulled me back into the nightmare. "Can't wait for your birthday party." The woman's face was kind, smiling as if she were sharing good news. "Everyone's talking about it." I froze, forcing a polite smile. "Oh, thanks." Inside, the humiliation churned. It wasn't just family, not just work anymore. It was in the streets. Random strangers, people who knew my name but not my truth, all of them convinced I was hosting a spectacle. As I pushed my cart toward the checkout, the weight of it pressed harder. In a city like Austin, word spread fast, especially when fueled by Facebook. What people see online becomes reality, whether you want it or not. My silence had written me into a script I had never approved. I walked home with my grocery bags but barely registered what I had bought. The apples bruised slightly in the bag as I carried them, but my mind was already elsewhere. I set them on the counter and pulled my laptop closer. I opened a blank email, my hands trembling but firm. "To whom it may concern, regarding the unauthorized use of my name." Before I could hit send, my phone rang again. The caller ID glared back at me. Greenfield Event Hall, the venue manager herself. I hadn't slept much after the call with the venue manager. My nerves felt shredded, and when Odalis knocked on my door the next morning, I let her in without a word. She set her briefcase down and took one look at me, then at the pile of documents on the coffee table. Emails, screenshots, the glossy invitation I could barely stand to touch. I poured us both coffee and sat across from her. For a moment, she didn't speak. She just studied me with that steady gaze of hers, one that had carried me through law school applications and breakups. Finally, she leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "This isn't about a birthday," she said quietly. "This is about control. They've been writing your story for you, Marquette, and you've let them hold the pen." Her words cut deeper than anything my co-workers had said. I bristled, then sighed. "You think I don't know that? Every time I push back, they remind me I'm the youngest, the one who should be grateful. I let them take over small things, thinking it wasn't worth the fight. Now it's this." I waved toward the invoice sitting like a brick on the table. She didn't flinch. "If they signed anything under your name, that's fraud. Not family obligation. Fraud." I blinked at her. Hearing it in legal terms stripped away the haze of guilt my parents loved to wrap me in. "Fraud," I repeated. "Yes." She tapped the invoice. "You could fight this. But more than that, you need to decide if you'll let them keep doing it. You're 30 years old, not 13. At some point, adulthood demands its own boundaries." I stared into my coffee, the steam fogging my glasses slightly. She was right. Pain throbbed in my chest, but alongside it came clarity. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't voiceless. What I had was leverage, and I needed to use it. The following day at work, that fragile clarity was tested. I walked into the break room mid-morning, intending only to grab water. Two colleagues were huddled near the coffee machine, voices low but sharp enough to reach me. "She must have gotten some huge promotion," one said. "That's the only way she could afford a party like this." The other snorted. "Or maybe she's trying to impress the executives. You know how people get when they want to climb the ladder." My stomach tightened. Rumors now. Not just invitations or Facebook posts. Whispers twisting my career into vanity projects. I cleared my throat as I stepped closer. They froze, cups half filled, eyes wide for a beat before settling into awkward smiles. "Good morning," I said evenly. "Morning," one muttered, looking down. I could feel the heat in my face, but I kept my voice calm. "Just so you know, none of this party nonsense is true. My parents acted without asking me. I didn't plan any of it." The silence that followed told me enough. They didn't believe me. Or worse, they thought I was embarrassed and covering. As I turned to leave, I caught my manager watching from the doorway. He didn't say a word, but the skeptical arch of his brow carved into me deeper than any rumor. By lunch, I sat alone, the noise of the cafeteria blurring into a dull roar. I'd always believed credibility was built by years of hard work, but here it was unraveling because of a spectacle I hadn't chosen. In corporate America, reputation isn't just part of the game, it is the game, and mine was slipping from my hands. That night, I sat with my journal open, replaying Odalis's words and the looks at work. I wrote slowly, each letter pressing deeper into the page. They think I'm too quiet to fight back. Maybe it's time to prove them wrong. On the next page, I listed potential actions. Call the venue formally and document every exchange. Hire a lawyer to review the invoices. Speak openly to my colleagues instead of letting rumors dictate the story. The list steadied me. My silence so far had only fueled their control. If I kept quiet, I'd remain the shy youngest, the woman too timid to draw a line. I closed the journal and stood by the window. The Austin skyline glowed against the night, the hum of the city seeping through my glass. Somewhere between anger and exhaustion, something inside me shifted. Resolve. Not fiery, not explosive. Quiet, firm, rooted. I whispered, "Enough." Just then, my phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up, expecting another RSVP. Instead, the message was from my aunt, Vespera Quinn. "We need to talk about your attitude before this dinner." I stared at the screen, my pulse steady, my jaw set. If they thought dinner would tame me, they were wrong. This dinner would be another battlefield. I knew the message from Aunt Vespera wasn't a request, it was a summons. The way she phrased it, "We need to talk about your attitude before this dinner," made my skin crawl. Still, that evening I drove to her suburban house, heart heavy with the certainty that this would be no casual meal. Her home looked welcoming from the outside, porch light glowing, manicured hedges framing the walkway, laughter filtering faintly through the windows. But the moment I stepped inside, my stomach twisted. A long dining table stretched across the room, covered in a spotless white cloth, the kind only pulled out for important occasions. Every chair was filled. Cousins, aunts, uncles, even neighbors I didn't know had been invited. The smell of roast chicken and baked bread should have been comforting, but it only masked the tension that pulsed beneath. Everyone greeted me with smiles too wide, voices too sweet. "Marquette?" "So glad you came," one cousin said, kissing my cheek as though nothing had been boiling for weeks. Another chimed in, "We've been waiting for you. Sit, sit." I smiled stiffly, sliding into my seat, but inside I was bracing myself. This wasn't a dinner. It was an intervention. In American families, dinner tables can be more dangerous than courtrooms. Here, guilt is assumed, silence is treated as confession, and loyalty is demanded. I glanced around, realizing I was already cast as the guilty one before a word was spoken. We started eating in near silence, the clatter of silverware oddly loud. But once plates were half empty, the trap was sprung. "So," my uncle said casually, "why are you making this party such a big deal? Everyone's excited. It's not like we get to do this every year." My father jumped in before I could reply, his voice sharp with disappointment. "It's just a celebration, Marquette." Don't ruin it for everyone. My mother followed, her tone dripping with sorrow. You'll break your family's heart if you embarrass us like this. Think about what people will say. Do you really want to be remembered as ungrateful? Around the table, voices layered over one another. Cousins murmuring about sacrifice, an aunt whispering about family duty, someone else adding, "It's not all about you." I held my fork tightly, forcing myself to stay calm. It is my name, my finances, my life. None of you asked me before turning it into your project. The response was laughter, dismissive, echoing, like a chorus. My father shook his head. There she goes again, exaggerating, always dramatic. This isn't dinner, I thought bitterly. This is a trial, and the verdict was written before I walked in. The barrage continued, voices blending into one long accusation. I stared at my plate, every word carving into me like a blade. Humiliation pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. Yet beneath it, something hotter stirred, anger, sharp and undeniable. Just as the noise began to dull into background static, Aunt Vespera leaned toward me. Her expression was soft, her voice gentle, though loud enough for all to hear. "Sweetheart," she said, reaching for my hand, "don't ruin this for everyone. Sacrifice is part of love. We're only asking because we believe in you." The family nodded in unison, eyes full of staged sympathy. Her manipulation cloaked as kindness cut deeper than the outright attacks. Betrayal doesn't always shout, it whispers, dressed in the language of love. For a moment, my throat tightened with the urge to scream, to pound the table and demand they stop. But instead, I breathed deeply, holding on to what little control I still owned. I met her gaze, steady and unwavering. "Love without respect is control," I said quietly, but firmly enough for every ear in the room. And I won't accept that anymore. The table froze. Forks halted mid-air, eyes widened, silence fell like a heavy curtain. For the first time all evening, they were the ones without words. Just then, my phone vibrated against the wood of the table. All eyes turned toward the glowing screen. The caller ID read, "Event venue, urgent call." I pushed my chair back slowly, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Excuse me," I said evenly, standing to leave the table. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me, mixing with the fire still burning in my chest. After leaving my aunt's house, I didn't go straight to bed. My nerves were shot, but exhaustion didn't bring sleep. Instead, I spread the papers, emails, and screenshots across my dining table like puzzle pieces. The evidence of their manipulation was everywhere. Group chats where my name was tossed around like a pawn, invoices stamped with my information, the glossy invitations that still glared at me from the corner of the desk. I powered on my laptop and opened a fresh folder. I labeled it plainly, Evidence. One by one, I dragged in the files. Screenshots of relatives talking about me as if I were absent. Emails from the venue confirming services in my name. Copies of my mother's proud social media posts. Even a note I typed about the stranger in the grocery store, smiling as she told me how everyone was buzzing about my big celebration. I paused, staring at the folder as it grew heavier. In America, proof matters, I murmured to myself. Emotions can be denied, but documents can't. Odalis's words from earlier echoed in my ears. If they signed anything under your name, that's fraud. I repeated it quietly, letting the weight of the words sink in. Fraud. This wasn't just family pressure anymore. It was theft of identity and dignity. I closed my eyes, breathing steadily. I wasn't in despair, not anymore. This was calculation. If they wanted me to be silent, then silence would become my shield while I sharpened my knives. They thought I was weak. Let them think so. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. By the time I finally shut the laptop, the room felt colder. Determination had replaced fatigue. The next morning, my phone buzzed before I'd finished my first sip of coffee. I glanced at the screen and froze. An old college friend had tagged me on Instagram. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There it was, a glossy picture of the invitation laid out on her counter, captioned with cheery enthusiasm. "Can't wait for Marquette's lavish birthday. She's always been larger than life." My chest tightened. Comments rolled in beneath it like a tidal wave. "Wish I was invited." "Looks like she's showing off." "Wow, 250 people. Fancy." Heat flushed my face. This wasn't just family anymore. The narrative was cementing itself online, turning me into the arrogant host of a spectacle I never planned. I messaged her directly. "This isn't mine. My parents did this without asking. Please take it down." Her reply came quickly. "Relax, it's just fun. Everyone's talking about it anyway. Don't be so sensitive." The dismissal stung more than the post itself. Betrayal always cuts deeper when it comes from someone you once trusted. She knew me in college. She knew I never cared for spotlight or extravagance, yet she chose to join the crowd rather than believe me. I set the phone down hard, staring at the screen as more notifications poured in. Reflection rose like bile. It isn't enemies who wound the deepest. It's the people you once let close. By noon, my name was circulating across multiple posts. Each share painted me further into a caricature I didn't recognize. The sting of humiliation was sharp, but beneath it, bitterness settled like stone. If they wanted to paint me as arrogant, maybe it was time to let them choke on their own lies. That evening, I returned to the desk and opened my journal. The words came slowly at first, then faster. If they want a story, I'll give them one, but it will end on my terms. I began drafting a formal complaint to the venue, citing breach of consent, unauthorized use of personal information, and possible fraud. My legal wording was clumsy, but precise enough to make my point. At the same time, I saved every screenshot of social media posts, every smug caption, every mocking comment. Justice Louis Brandeis's words came to me then, something I'd read years ago. Sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. If they wanted shadows and secrets, I would drown them in light. Anger no longer burned wild. It crystallized into resolve. This would not end with me humiliated. It would not end with me as the victim. My phone buzzed again. Expecting another notification, I glanced casually, but the message on the screen froze me in place. It was from my boss. RSVP confirmed. "Yes, looking forward to celebrating with you." My breath caught. My career, the one thing I had built on integrity and discipline, was now entangled in this farce. My silence had let it spread too far, and if I didn't act soon, I wouldn't just lose my dignity, I could lose everything I'd worked for. The call from the venue manager had lingered in my head all night. By morning, I decided I needed to see everything with my own eyes. I drove across town to Greenfield Event Hall, my grip tight on the steering wheel. The building stood tall, polished glass gleaming in the sunlight, a place meant for weddings, galas, not a birthday party I had never agreed to host. The manager, a woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense look, greeted me at the entrance. "Miss Vale," she said briskly, "I'm glad you're here. Preparations are moving quickly, and we'll need your approval on a few final details." "My approval?" I repeated, the words bitter in my mouth. "I didn't approve any of this in the first place." She frowned, guiding me toward the main hall. As the doors swung open, my heart clenched. Rows of floral arrangements lined the aisles, tables set with polished silverware, seating charts pinned neatly to a corkboard with my name embossed across the top. Catering checklists, contracts, even place cards, all carried my name. "Everything is coming together beautifully," the manager continued, mistaking my silence for awe. I turned to her sharply. "This event was planned without my consent. I never authorized this. My parents did it behind my back." Her professional smile didn't waver, but her voice firmed. "Your parents signed under your name. Legally, this makes you the responsible party. If you want to cancel, we'll need your directive, but understand, Ms. Vale, liability falls on you." The words dropped like a hammer. Anger flared hot in my chest, mixing with the sting of fear. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was entrapment, contracts written in my blood without my hand. I walked deeper into the hall, the sound of my heels echoing on the polished floor. Every flower, every draped curtain mocked me, as though the room itself had been stolen. I stopped in the center, forcing my breath steady. "Then cancel it," I said, turning back to her. "Right now, this party is not happening under my name." Her eyes widened slightly, surprised by the steel in my tone. For a moment, she seemed ready to protest, then nodded. "Very well, I'll draft an official cancellation notice, but you'll need to sign it." Relief washed through me, though it was laced with dread. Canceling meant fallout. Canceling meant confrontation. But silence had already destroyed too much. I wouldn't let it bury me further. I stood alone in that vast, empty hall as staff quietly carried trays past me, their footsteps shuffling against the carpet. I closed my eyes and pictured 250 guests filling the space, laughing, drinking, celebrating a fiction I had been forced into. The thought made my stomach twist. In American culture, speaking up is often harder than staying quiet, but silence is what traps you. I remembered a quote I had once read from John Lewis. "Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble." Canceling this wasn't trouble. It was good trouble. For the first time in weeks, I felt my voice carrying weight. The next morning at work, I carried that fragile strength with me. But it didn't last long. I was reviewing mortgage applications when my boss approached my desk, his usual smile broader than normal. "Marquette," he said warmly, "I just wanted to thank you for including us. I RSVP'd yes to your birthday. We're looking forward to it." The words hit me like a punch. My throat tightened. Despite the cancellation, the story had already spread too far. The lie had outpaced the truth. "Sir," I began carefully, "there's been a mistake. My parents acted without my permission. I canceled the event yesterday." His smile faltered. He tilted his head, skeptical. "I hope you're not playing games with professional contacts. People talk, you know." Reputation matters in this field. Heat rose in my face. "I'm not playing games," I said firmly. "I never wanted this party. I've been cleaning up their mess since the invitations went out." He gave me a long look, unreadable, then nodded curtly and walked away. But the doubt lingered in his eyes. I sat frozen, the low murmur of the office buzzing around me. Colleagues passed by, some with curious glances, others with faint smirks. I could hear whispers at the water cooler, faint mentions of her big party, extravagant, over the top. Humiliation tightened in my chest, twisting into rage. My parents' lies had chained themselves to my career, the one part of my life I had built carefully, honestly. Now it was at risk of being reduced to a spectacle. I clenched my fists under the desk and whispered to myself, steady and low, "If they want a war, they'll get one." When I got home after that day at work, the weight of humiliation still sat heavy on my chest. My boss's skeptical glance replayed over and over. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. If I didn't fight back now, the lies would cement themselves forever. I pulled out every scrap of evidence I had collected, the invoices, the emails, the screenshots of smug family messages, and the endless social media posts. Odalis had given me notes on what could constitute fraud, and I reread them carefully. I placed everything into a binder, neat and methodical, each page protected in a clear sleeve. As I sorted, my eyes caught on something new in my inbox. Another message from Greenfield Event Hall. At first I thought it was confirmation of my cancellation. But as I clicked, my stomach dropped. It was a second invoice, larger than the first. Thousands more, for premium catering upgrades and floral redesign. Every line item stacked under my name. My hands trembled, but this time it wasn't fear. It was anger, sharp and cold. They weren't just using me, they were burying me alive under debt. Quietly, I whispered, "Injustice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it comes in neat envelopes with polite headers." I slid the new invoice into the binder, the final piece of proof I needed. Then I called the venue manager. "We need to meet," I told her, "and my parents will be there." The following afternoon, I walked into Greenfield Event Hall again, this time not to observe but to confront. The manager led us into a glass-walled conference room overlooking the hall, where half the decorations still stood waiting. My parents arrived confident, almost smug. My father clapped me on the shoulder as though we were partners. "Relax," he said with a smile. We'll handle this together. I sat across from them, placing the thick binder on the table with a deliberate thud. This event is cancelled, I said evenly. And here's why. I opened the binder and slid out the first invoice, then the second, then the screenshots of the group chat, one by one. My mother shifted in her seat, her smile faltering. You've exaggerated this, my father scoffed. This is family business, not legal drama. The venue manager leaned forward, her expression firm. No, sir, this is legal business. Your daughter is correct. Liability is on her name, not yours. What you've done here is not only unethical, but potentially criminal. The words cut through the room like a knife. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker across my father's face. I turned the pages deliberately, showing them every damning detail, and then I read aloud from the group chat, my voice steady. Better not ask her. She'll overthink. Easier to ask forgiveness than permission. The room went still. My mother's hands trembled slightly, her face paling. The manager folded her arms. Do you understand what this means? You've acted on her behalf without her consent. That is not forgiveness. That is fraud. I didn't stop. I pulled out the second invoice and slapped it on the table, the sound echoing against the glass walls. You added charges, more catering, more flowers, all in my name. You wanted to trap me under bills I never agreed to pay. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother tried to stammer out a defense. We only wanted to make it special. We thought she... But the manager cut her off, unimpressed. Intentions don't erase consequences. Silence stretched long and heavy. For once, the shame was no longer mine to carry. It sat squarely in front of them, undeniable, written in ink and signatures they could no longer spin into family obligation. The manager cleared her throat, her tone final. We'll need to discuss consequences, legal ones. My mother's eyes widened in shock, her lips parting, but no sound emerging. My father stared at the table, jaw tight. I closed the binder with a sharp snap. The sound rang like a gavel. I looked at them both and said quietly, I warned you. The fallout from the meeting at the venue spread faster than I could have imagined. I had walked out of that glass-walled conference room feeling vindicated, binder tucked under my arm like a shield. But vindication is rarely clean. By the time I returned to work the next day, whispers had already begun circulating. The narrative wasn't just about forged contracts anymore. It had taken on a life of its own, twisting, mutating, until it no longer resembled the truth. At lunch, while waiting for my sandwich, I overheard two colleagues chatting near the vending machines. One lowered his voice, but not enough. I heard her family had to step in because she doesn't have any real friends. They invited their people to fill the seats. The other chuckled, shaking his head. Makes sense. You'd never guess it looking at her, but I guess she's one of those quiet types no one really knows. The words lodged in my chest like shards of glass. I turned away before they could see me react, clutching the wrapped sandwich so tightly the paper crinkled. Back at my desk, I replayed their words again and again. She never had friends. That's why we had to invite ours. It wasn't about the party anymore. It was about erasing me entirely, my worth, my relationships, my independence. They weren't just controlling my narrative, they were rewriting my identity. I forced myself to breathe, remembering something Michelle Obama once said, when they go low, we go high. But I realized that didn't mean silence. Going high meant refusing to let lies stick. Going high meant strength, not passivity. The next blow came 2 days later. A friend from church messaged me. So proud to see the GoFundMe. I donated this morning. I frowned, typing back, What GoFundMe? She sent the link. My jaw dropped as the page loaded. Help Marquette host the birthday she deserves. There it was. My photo, lifted from my work profile, smiling awkwardly under the banner of a false appeal. The description read as though I had written it myself. Turning 30 is a once-in-a-lifetime milestone. With your support, I can host the dream celebration my family and I envision. Every dollar counts. Donations had already poured in. Strangers left cheery comments. So proud to support you. We're honored to help make your dream come true. My face burned hot. This wasn't just gossip whispered in break rooms or Facebook comments written by distant relatives. This was theft in broad daylight. My name had become a currency traded publicly, without my permission. I called Odalis immediately, my voice shaking with fury. They set up a fundraiser, with my name, my picture. People are donating, thinking they're helping me. There was a pause on the other end, then her tone sharpened. This isn't just character assassination, this is financial fraud, and it's public. They've crossed a line you can't ignore. I feel sick, I admitted, pacing my apartment. They weren't just using me, they're selling me. Then we use this, she said firmly. We document everything, every screenshot, every donor comment. We don't just shut it down, we turn it against them. Her words steadied me. For the first time, I realized this humiliation could be more than a wound. It could be leverage. That night, I sat down at my desk and began gathering everything again. Screenshots of the GoFundMe, paired with the earlier invoices, group chat messages, and Facebook posts. The binder grew thicker, heavier, no longer just a shield, but a weapon. As I typed a formal complaint, I felt the anger in me settle into something sharper. Control is a game of perception. They wanted me to look weak, but weakness ends when evidence speaks. Maya Angelou's words floated into my mind, words I had once underlined in a book. You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. I whispered them aloud, feeling them anchor me. I attached the compiled evidence to an email and sent it to my lawyer, my heart pounding as I hit send. The moment the message whooshed away, a strange calm spread through me. The truth was finally leaving the confines of my laptop, but almost instantly, my phone buzzed. A new text flashed on the screen. It was from my mother. We need to talk, before you destroy this family. I stared at the words, my jaw tightening. For once, I wasn't the one about to be destroyed. The text from my mother was still burning on my phone screen when it rang. I stared at the caller ID, knowing exactly what was coming. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a lifetime of conditioned response made me swipe to answer. Her voice trembled with that practiced mixture of anger and sorrow. Marquette, if you cancel this, you will shame this family forever. I didn't reply immediately. I let the words sit in the silence, heavy as a stone. She pressed on, layering guilt like icing on a cake no one wanted. We raised you, sacrificed everything, and this is how you repay us. After all we've done, you want to humiliate us in front of everyone? Her tone, the way she dragged the weight of years into a single accusation, was familiar, but something in me had shifted. I was tired, yes, but no longer powerless. Respect isn't earned by erasing someone, I said quietly. It's lost that way. She scoffed. You've always been dramatic. This isn't erasing you, it's celebrating you. You'll see that one day when you grow up enough to appreciate what family means. Exhaustion pressed at my temples, but with it came a clarity so sharp it steadied me. What family means, I said, my voice firmer now, is love and respect, not love that erases, not love that cages. For a moment, she said nothing. I imagined her lips pressed thin, the way they always did when I refused to bend. Finally, she whispered, "You'll regret this." No, I said, and for the first time in years, I believed it. I'll regret not drawing the line sooner. I ended the call before she could reply. The silence in my apartment afterward felt heavier than her words. I sat down, staring at the dim glow of the city through my window. The phone lay face down on the table, but the echo of her guilt trip still circled in my head. I thought of every invoice, every smirk at work, every whisper about my life. Odalis's voice replayed too. This isn't about a party. This is about control. Letting go isn't betrayal, I told myself. Sometimes letting go is survival. I pulled out a fresh page in my notebook and began writing. Not about costs or contracts this time, but boundaries. My rules. No one uses my name without explicit permission, no access to my accounts, no spare keys, no guilt framed as obligation. It felt strange to write them out, but also liberating, like shackles slowly unlocking. Brené Brown's words came to me from a lecture I'd once watched. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. The risk of disappointing my parents had always felt unbearable. But now, disappointing myself felt worse. Bitterness still lingered, but it began to loosen its grip. In its place, something steadier rose. Empowerment. I poured a glass of water and sat by the window. The city lights shimmered against the night sky, a reminder that the world was bigger than the small cage my family had built for me. For the first time, I let myself imagine what life would be like without constant interference, without my every decision twisted into someone else's script. It hurt. Love doesn't vanish just because respect is absent, but love without respect is a prison, and I was done being its inmate. I picked up my phone again, my thumb hovering over the screen, and typed a final message to my parents. I will always love you, but from this moment on, I live on my own terms. I hit send before fear could stop me. The message whooshed away, leaving behind an emptiness that felt both like grief and like freedom. I leaned back, sipping from my glass, the silence no longer suffocating, but cleansing. For decades, I had been the quiet one, the accommodating one. Now, for the first time, I felt like myself. Just as the thought settled, my phone buzzed again. I turned it over, expecting silence, maybe even nothing at all. Instead, a notification from the community board popped up. A fresh post, spreading yet another rumor under my name. I set the glass down and leaned back in my chair, whispering to the quiet room. Then let the truth be louder than their lies. The morning after my mother's call, I woke with a strange calm. The fear that had once wrapped around me was gone. What remained was something sharper, resolve. I stood by the window with a cup of coffee and whispered to myself, love should be a choice, not a cage. Today, I cut the lock. By mid-afternoon, the knock on my door came, loud and insistent. I already knew who it was. My parents didn't wait for an invitation. They never had. When I opened the door, they walked in as if they still owned me. You've destroyed our reputation, my mother said before I could speak. Her face was taut, eyes gleaming with fury. My father followed, voice booming. Do you understand what you've done? You'll regret this when you're alone. Family is all you'll ever have. I stood tall in the doorway, letting their accusations wash over me. I'd rather stand alone in truth, I answered, than be crowded in lies. My mother scoffed. Crowded in lies. You call celebration lies? Celebration built on my stolen name isn't love, I said. It's theft. They looked at me with the same mixture of anger and disbelief they had always used to keep me small. But their words bounced off me now, dull stones that no longer pierced. I walked to the table where I had laid out a stack of documents. Slowly, deliberately, I handed them over. Legal notices Odalis had prepared, copies of the fraudulent invoices, screenshots of the GoFundMe page that had been shut down after Odalis's intervention. My mother's face drained of color as she scanned the papers. My father's jaw tightened. You didn't just hurt me, I said steadily, my voice calm but cutting. You humiliated yourselves, and now everyone will see it for what it is. This is family, my father muttered, still trying to cling to the old shield. You don't drag family into courts. I met his eyes. You dragged me there the moment you forged my name. The silence stretched. Their pride cracked wide open, leaving only the faint sound of paper rustling between us. They left without another word, their footsteps heavy as if carrying the weight of their own shame. For the first time, I felt free. Revenge hadn't come in flames or shouting. It came in sunlight, in truth, laid bare for all to see. Days later, on the evening of my actual birthday, my apartment was filled not with strangers or forced smiles, but with warmth. Odalis came first, carrying a simple bouquet of daisies. A few close friends followed, each bringing something small, a bottle of wine, a pie, laughter that filled the space more richly than any grand venue ever could. The decorations were minimal, just candles and the soft glow of string lights across the wall. The food was simple, homemade dishes, mismatched plates, but it was mine. We sat around my small table, stories flowing easily. At one point, Odalis raised her glass. "This," she said, her eyes meeting mine, "is your story now. And it's only beginning." Her words settled deep inside me. I realized in that moment I didn't need their approval or their stage. My existence was valid without their permission. "Sometimes family isn't who raised you," I said softly, looking around the table. "It's who stands with you when the storm hits." A hush fell over the room, but it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that carries truth. I thought of Maya Angelou's words, "I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it." When the cake came out, it was small and modest, with a single candle flickering in the center. I closed my eyes, not to wish for anything, but to mark the moment. I inhaled deeply, then blew out the flame, a quiet act that felt louder than any speech. As the room erupted into cheers and laughter, I felt something inside me settle into place. I was no longer the daughter defined by others, no longer the youngest written off as too quiet to object. This was the year I stopped being their daughter first, and became myself.